Good morning. Come on, let's get the energy going. Good morning. Wonderful. It's great to be here. First of all, I would like to thank the Sangfor team for providing me with this opportunity to come and showcase to you IDC's research on what we see happening across the technology industry. But more importantly, looking at the impact of Gen AI, and what we call an AI everywhere world. So I've been given 30 minutes. So in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to share with you IDC's global research, and I'm going to specifically kind of highlight some broad level trends that we see across this region. We've got international delegates here from India, from the Middle East, from Africa, from Latin America, from Europe, across Europe. So in the next 30 minutes, I'd like to showcase some of the broad level trends of what we see. Now, I have the unique privilege of talking to CIOs and heads of IT across multiple industries in this region. And I want to leave you with a few points of how we see the landscape evolving. But before we talk about AI everywhere, I would like to kind of briefly showcase the journey that we've all been through over the past few years. And the first part of the journey was really around multiplied innovation. And I talk about the four forces of industry transformation. Talk about cloud, analytics, mobile, and social that were really the underlying features of digital transformation, so to speak. We are in this middle phase of what we call platforms and communities, where everything is now delivered as a service. Your applications, your infrastructure, so on and so forth. But during this phase, we've also seen the creation of these foundational models, including the large language model. So we are seeing a massive amount of disruption that I want to talk about that I think provides us with a unique opportunity to transform our businesses, regardless of the industries in which you operate. If you're a partner or an end customer, this is an incredible opportunity to transform your organization. And we are moving into what we call an AI everywhere phase, where we're going to see 5 key characteristics that are going to really define this next era. And the first one is that we are going to move from a much more narrow AI, where AI systems were designed for a specific task or a set of tasks, to a much more widening AI. And the industry also calls this broad AI, where AI systems will essentially manage and process information and act almost like human-like intelligence. The second characteristic that I'm going to talk about in some detail is that the data-centric platform is really going to underpin a lot of this. And how do you get the insights at the right time, in the right context, and at scale is going to be critically important in this journey. So data is going to be extremely critical. The third characteristic, the third feature, which I want to highlight, is the fact that we are going to see a lot more focus by organizations to build digital infrastructure, cost-effective digital infrastructure, given some of these AI workloads that we will be adopting within the enterprise. The fourth concept is really around skills. And for us to truly benefit and leverage AI capabilities, we need to think about what new sets of digital skills and capabilities we need to draw within the organization. We are going to see much more transformed work models as we automate more and leverage Gen AI and AI across our organization. And finally, trust is not going to be an afterthought, but trust is something that we will need to think right off the bat. And so building that trust for our customers, our internal organization, is going to be critically important and will be the number one area for you to consider right off the bat when you're building your overall strategies. So when we think of the overall Gen AI market opportunity, in 2024, we believe that overall spending on Gen AI globally is going to hit about $40 billion. And if I take these $40 billion and think about where are we spending our investments today, we are spending about slightly less than half of our investments on building Gen AI infrastructure. And slightly more than half of it, about 55% of the investments, are going towards Gen AI services, going towards applications, going towards application development, deployment, platforms, so to speak. But if you think about the investments that we're going to see in Gen AI between 2024 and 2027, it's going to expand almost 4 times. So we're going to see a market investment of over $150 billion in Gen AI. But what I also want to highlight, that Gen AI is not the only aspect of our business that's going to transform. Gen AI, of course, is just part of the overall AI ecosystem, and Gen AI will represent roughly 1/3 of overall AI investments by 2027. So we're seeing a significant investments in Gen AI, broadly according from infrastructure to applications to services to application development and deployment tools. And so when we think about this Gen AI, or we call the AI everywhere phase, I look at 3 broad phases that I think I want to highlight to you this morning. A lot of the investments today in Gen AI is what we call centered on the productivity pivot, investing in areas to have productivity gains for the organization. The second phase, which we're going to see a lot more widespread adoption, is going to be in 2025, is really around what we define as the experience advantage, where I see Gen AI essentially becoming the conversational user interface of how we manage and how we deal and how we interact with data within our own organization. The third phase is going to be really around the growth. And towards the end of next year and early 2026, we're going to see a lot more pressure on the IT organization and on the CIO organization to deliver value in terms of net new revenue streams or cost savings. So the focus is going to shift from just productivity to how do I create new revenue streams, how do I create new revenue monetization opportunities using Gen AI. And by 2026, organizations globally will leverage these technologies, automation technologies, Gen AI technologies, to drive nearly $1 trillion of productivity gains. So while the short-term focus is going to be on productivity, the longer-term goal is really going to be centered around organizations that are going to co-develop products and services, creating these digital platforms to actually create new revenue streams for their organization. And we think by 2025, about 1/3 of the organizations will actually leverage these technologies, and their revenue streams, or the growth in their revenue, is going to be almost twice as their competitors. So this is going to be the value differentiation that organizations are going to enjoy to drive even more success. And so we're seeing a very growing kind of diverse set of use cases that we are tracking across multiple industries. And if you think about Denso, which is a marketing and collaboration organization, investments and use cases around content automation. You look at Carrefour in the retail space that I'll talk about, are leveraging Gen AI for product information, for product innovation. Vodafone on the contact center side, a lot of investments around the contact center area. We think about Total, which is looking at leveraging Gen AI for technical development analysis, technical document analysis. Or you think about Lufthansa that's using data. We're having multiple organizations in a wide range of industries that are leveraging Gen AI use cases to drive productivity on the one hand, but also about reducing costs and driving new revenue streams on the other side. And so what I'd like to spend maybe a couple minutes on is to share with you some interesting use cases. And I'll start off first with Clara, which is a Swedish e-commerce, or rather fintech company. And Klarna has almost 85 million active subscribers, 2 million transactions per day. And this is an organization that are now leveraging an AI assistant that's been developed and powered by OpenAI to completely transform how they interact with their customers. They are now having the equivalent of almost 700 full-time agents work now automated and leverage the OpenAI platform for their customer interactions. What's interesting is that the customer satisfaction scores by leveraging this OpenAI assistant is almost on par with what they had in terms of their human agents. And so they are available now in 23 markets, in about 35 different languages, a 24/7 operation, a classic example of an organization that has leveraged Gen AI or leveraged AI technology powered by OpenAI to radically transform the way they interact with their customers. But there are multiple other industries where we are seeing some interesting use cases. And I want to highlight some of the interesting use cases, the top 3 use cases in select industries. I'm going to talk about banking, financial services, look at retail, look at areas like energy, and give you a sense of what are some organizations doing really and what are the key use cases that organizations are investing in. Now, what's interesting on some of these Gen AI use cases is that a lot of these use cases are actually driven at a functional level. From sales, marketing, finance, procurement, we're seeing a number of interesting use cases driven by line of business. And I'm going to showcase what that means in the context of more collaboration between IT and lines of business. And so let's start an example of banking financial services, and ING is a good example of that. Leveraging Gen AI platforms to increase the level of interaction, managing more customers, 20% more customers than the traditional models that they have been used to. Or if you think about in the investment banking community, we have a classic case of JP Morgan that has actually developed their own LLM, what they call a Quest Index GPT, which provides very targeted advice to its customers, but also its wealth management advisors on board to create more value for its customer base. Or if you think about AXA Insurance in Turkey, which is leveraging this to really prevent some of the fraud detection areas, as you know, a very high area of risk in the insurance services sector. Leveraging Gen AI to develop what they call AI computable contracts, basically underwriting contracts in a much more automated manner. So leveraging Gen AI to really leverage some of these use cases across the organization. Let's look at another example of retail and talk about Carrefour. In France, there's actually kind of leveraging Gen AI technology to improve the overall experience that it has for its online shoppers. Right from the entire customer journey, from providing menus to providing different ingredients required, the ability to increase the engagement with its customers to upsell and cross-sell different products and services through its online retail channel. Or let's look at the example of Trendyol, which has actually an e-commerce firm based out of Turkey again, which has invested and developed almost 10 billion tokens. And the investments that Trendyol has done is in terms of really built its own LLM model built on meta technology on Llama. And it's kind of a homegrown LLM model that's been developed in Turkey to really enhance the overall customer experience, making corrections to its products and services, completely transforming the way they interact with their customers, millions of customers across the Turkey market. Or finally, look at Zalando, which is, again, an e-commerce player headquartered in the UK. Hyper-personalized services, marketing content automation, really enhancing the overall customer experience, enhancing the overall automation of information and customer interactions at the back end by leveraging Gen AI technology. Interestingly, let's also look at the energy sector. And one interesting example, of course, is Saudi Aramco. And Saudi Aramco, as you know, is the largest oil and gas firm in the world based in Saudi Arabia, and actually have developed the world's largest industrial LLM. And this information that they've created the LLM is based on 90 years of data, or based on publicly available data, but also internal data, which is proprietary to Saudi Aramco. We're talking of roughly by the end of 2024, in the next 3 months, almost 1 trillion of parameter version by the end of 2024. And if you really think about this, the overall model was built on nearly 7 trillion of overall public data that's publicly available, but also their own internal data across the enterprise, leveraging it for their downstream business, but also the upstream business activities, from identifying potential drilling sites, doing the cost and benefit analysis, reducing costs, the drilling costs. This is a classic example of an organization that has built its own LLM model to transform its entire infrastructure, to transform both the upstream side of the business, but also the downstream side of the business. And so the path for you to consider as you kind of create this Gen AI value is to think about how do you establish these use cases? How do you prioritize these use cases? What kind of data is going to underpin your overall enterprise intelligence strategy architecture? What should be some of your hardware investment considerations that you will need to think about? How do you assess some of the longer-term costs associated with these investments? And what kind of new skills and capabilities that you need to drive to build a truly successful, transformed organization? I'd like to start first with how organizations are actually engaging the C-suite to prioritize these Gen AI use cases. And the very first step in this process is to understand that you need to identify the use cases that align with the broad level strategy of your organization. It needs to align perfectly. You need to identify and prioritize your use cases based on 3 key metrics. And the first important metric is to take a longer-term view and understand what is the value that these investments are going to create in the longer term. What economic value does it bring to your organization? How does it align with the broad level vision that you have within the organization? So the value is going to be critically important. The second aspect that I urge you not to underestimate is the complexity. And I'm going to talk about the fact that almost 2/3 of organizations that embark on the AI journeys by 2026 will fail. And there are a number of reasons for that, which I'll talk about. But don't underestimate the complexity involved in these Gen AI investments in terms of the quality of the data, the algorithms, the process know-how, the required know-how that you need within the organization. And the third aspect is the risk. And we'll talk about what this means to build a trusted AI enterprise. Now, as you prioritize these use cases, you then have to cluster these use cases and prioritize these use cases to eventually take it to the market. But the key aspect is going to be of how you're going to prioritize these use cases. I was talking to a few of the CIOs this week in another geography, and what became interesting for me was that organizations, on average, depending on function, have almost 4 to 5 use cases for each specific function, for sales, for marketing, from procurement, from finance. And so you have a number of organizations that are taking multiple use cases across functions. And so it's critically important for you to kind of prioritize the use cases based on these 3 metrics that I spoke about. Now, what became increasingly clear is that data is going to be the underlying or underpinning feature of this. And IDC has developed what we call an enterprise intelligent architecture. And for you to think broadly about the first question, how do you synthesize this information? Both from structured data, unstructured data, internal data, external data. How do you deliver all of these insights at the right time, in the right context, and at scale? How do you do the collective learning? How do you curate this learning not in silos, but across the enterprise? How do you get the information and insights across the enterprise? And how do you build this data culture? By leveraging technology on the one hand, but also the cultural aspect related to the data clarity and the data quality. So as you go out building out your data-centric, your data strategy, this is going to be a critical feature that will undermine how important and how successful your AI or Gen AI strategy is going to look like. Now, I spoke about the importance of digital infrastructure and AI infrastructure. Now, if you recall in the slide a few moments ago, I spoke about the fact that nearly half of investments on Gen AI is being driven by infrastructure investments. And this is going to be a critical feature for you to think about as you embark on your longer-term strategy. And organizations are spending on AI infrastructure in multiple ways. But 70% of organizations are spending it around ongoing LLM updates related to making sure the models are updated on a more frequent basis. Investments around customization of the model itself in terms of the models that they have purchased or licensed from third-party providers, fine-tuning those models, unstructured data. But what's important is that organizations are taking a hybrid, multi-cloud view to designing an architecture based on which these Gen AI models are working. Having said that, organizations are encountering many challenges. I want to highlight a few challenges that some of your peers and organizations across this region are encountering. The first one is the challenge with the volume of data that needs to be transported, the volume of data that needs to be migrated and managed and stored. Almost 50% of organizations we speak to believe that this is their number one challenge area. So think about the volume of data within your own environment, within your own organization that now needs to be transported. The second one is skills, or internal IT operation skills, cloud ops skills. Those are critically important, and the lack of skills is forcing organizations or slowing down some of these initiatives. So think clearly about what it means in your own environment in terms of skills requirements. The third area, which we're going to double-click a bit more in some time, is really around the insufficient data security, concerns around privacy, security, governance, compliance issues, the high frequency of the updates required to keep my model more relevant and accurate. So while there are investments being made in AI infrastructure, there are many challenges that your peers are encountering as well. And this is impacting some of the investments we see in the next 12 to 18 months. Greater investments in areas related to cybersecurity, given the fact that organizations have privacy and other compliance-related concerns, infrastructure complexity that they have, increased levels of automation. But if you think about the right-hand side of this chart, which really talks about the impact we're seeing in terms of increased capacity, consumption, and utilization, we're seeing organizations investing in or leveraging public cloud infrastructure, on-premise infrastructure, much more hybrid model that organizations are adopting and investing in terms of their capacity utilization and capacity consumption purposes. And so what has become very clear is that hybrid and multi-cloud architectures is going to dominate the overall discussion and agenda within your organization. You're going to be leveraging the public cloud for some of the what we call the shared LLMs and use cases that are based on public data and publicly available information, leveraging dedicated platforms for tuning some of the LLMs based on more sensitive and proprietary data and proprietary information that you have, but also edge inferencing for some of the use cases that are much more distributed across the enterprise. So a hybrid and multi-cloud architecture is going to dominate investments that organizations make in terms of their digital infrastructure or AI infrastructure investments in their organization. And so for you to think about very clearly what are some of your infrastructure needs, how do you define those, is going to be critically important. Around your hardware investments, around the memory and storage requirements, around the data management requirements. How do you manage the resource allocations across various components, parallel processing, some of the compliance and ethical considerations that you need to think about in terms of the data that you have. But increasingly, more importantly, think about the security-related issues and security-related challenges that you need to embrace yourself and be fully prepared for as you embark on this Gen AI journey. Because security is the number one area of concern for organizations. Regardless of the industries in which you operate, if you're a bank, financial services, in the public sector, or retail, or transportation, or insurance services, whether you're a small business, a medium business, a large, very large business, as you can see from our own research, it continues to be the number one or number two area of concern for organizations. So security is something that you really need to think about as your peers are concerned about security, concerned about some of the privacy concerns. The trust, the AI, building that AI trust is going to be critically important as you embark on this journey as well. And when we talk to organizations to really understand, what areas do you really need support? As you embark on this journey, of course, there's help with third-party selection, help with the model and governance of data, about the AI, custom AI model development, the training of it, the infrastructure modernization. The number one area of concern where organizations and CIOs and heads of IT require support is really around security, the privacy of information, the privacy of data, and building an organization that's trustworthy, or what I call building an AI trust framework. And IDC has developed this framework really looking at how do you build an AI trustworthy enterprise. The foundational layer is really centered around those guiding principles. And every organization has to define what are your guiding principles in terms of innovation, in terms of integrity, in terms of the transparency in which you manage and collect and store data. How do you build a secure infrastructure looking at the APIs and endpoints? Think about how do you authorize identities within the organization, the data itself, and how do you validate and build a much more compliant framework across the enterprise? And the objectives are twofold. From a business optimization side, you are automating, you are building more efficient infrastructures, driving more innovation. But also from a customer experience perspective, how do you build brand loyalty? Your customers demand you to be a trustworthy enterprise. How do you bring brand loyalty? How do you have a self-service model? How do you engage with your customers? So building and positioning yourself as an AI trustworthy organization will be critically important as you embark on this journey. And so we've defined what we call an AI governance by design, not by default, but by design. And you essentially have three clusters and three blocks that you need to think about. What are your standards, or what are your governance standards for the data that you have, for the model and application governance, but also on the usage governance of how you use that data internally and externally. And so increasingly, we're going to see a much more broader framework where organizations will have to design an AI governance by design. And this will impact three areas. This is going to impact in terms of how you're going to consider some of these AI policies in your commercial contracts with your partners. What does it mean in terms of indemnification against risks? What does it mean in terms of reframing SLAs that you have with your partners and suppliers? So we're going to see a much more collaborative, a much more partnered approach between you and your partner to build and consider some of these AI governance by design frameworks to make this truly worthwhile and to make this truly successful. And I'd like to highlight here, before we move on, that AI governance is not an IT issue alone. When you think about AI, when you think about security, when you think about all these privacy concerns, this is going to be a much more broader level engagement across the C-suite. Your marketing officer has to be involved in terms of understanding what is my charter for the brand, what is my charter for the customers. Your financial officer, CFO, has to be engaged to understand what are the associated risks and what are the financial risks associated with this. Your chief data officer, your chief legal officer, your chief executive officer. This is an entire C-suite this is a C-suite broad level change engagement across the enterprise, not just a technology conversation. The other area, just to wrap up, is really around skills. And I urge you to think about new sets of skills and capabilities that you need to draw as you have transformed work models. And don't underestimate some of the non-technical skills requirements. As you embark on this AI journey, you're going to have new sets of skills and new sets of capabilities that you need to draw in. But you also need to invest in some of these human skills, in some of these digital business skills, the non-technical skills that are going to be critically important. Change management. How do I build more change management processes and skills within the organization? How do I build more governance skills within the organization? A lot of these non-technical skills are going to be increasingly important as you embark on this journey. So, what lies ahead? As I wrap up, I want to make 5 predictions. The first prediction we have for 2025 is that organizations, more than two-thirds of organizations, at least the global 2,000 organizations, will prioritize some of the management oversight on the ethical and responsible use of AI. So expect to see this becoming a broad level board engagement where organizations are going to take a much more serious view around their AI governance policies. The second prediction we have for 2025 again is about there's going to be a massive disruption in the services landscape. About 40% of the organizations will now start to include Gen AI-assisted delivery compared to a human-assisted delivery. This is going to completely transform the way services are delivered and services are procured and invested across by organizations. Let's take a slightly more longer-term view by 2026. And we're going to see significant impact on the infrastructure side. We're going to see significant declines in some of the ASVs of these chipsets. That's going to drop by almost 25% given the market reset. Let's think about data and models. About 60% of our organizations, some of their Gen AI initiatives will actually fail. And they will fail because they will fail to get the interlock between the data, the applications, and the models. And finally, on the application side, about 40% of enterprise applications will be so-called intelligent applications. With Gen AI assisted at the back end, we're going to create a number of use cases that's going to completely transform the way applications are delivered and applications are consumed, powered by Gen AI at the back end. And so as we wrap up, how do you create this Gen AI-based value today? Think about those use cases. Think about how you prioritize these use cases based on the economic value, on the strategic alignment with your business, but also think about the complexities when you design and decide which use cases to prioritize. Think about the digital or the AI infrastructure investments that you need to consider. We are going to be having a much more hybrid, multi-cloud world that's going to drive our AI infrastructure investments. Think about the skills requirements that we spoke about, new sets of skills and capabilities within your organization. Not just the technical skills, but the human skills, the digital business skills, the change management skills, new sets of capabilities. Think about security. Security is going to be an interesting and a more important area as you build an AI governance by design model on the usage, on the data, on the model itself. And so hopefully this has set the scene for some of the conversations that are lined up for you throughout the day today. I'm looking forward to engaging in a panel discussion later this afternoon and look forward to continued conversations. Thank you very much and enjoy the event.